I am so excited for today's episode. I am sitting here with one of my mentors, one of the women who have cracked me open so much, especially in the last week we've been live
Right.
in retreat. And as I've sat down here, she's like, do you want to do it real quick? Do you want to drop in? So we've just literally dropped in together. Today, welcoming to the Embodied Business Show is Miss Em Gallagher.
Woohoo! Thanks, babe. So excited to be here with you, especially in the vortex we've just been in together.
Embodied business. We were just talking then about it's so important just to take that 15 seconds and be here. And after that weekend, I already feel the trajectory of how my life has shifted and how my life has just grown massively.
Right? In 48 hours.
Yeah, I'm just literally telling you about how my partner's oh my God, just coming up to me and grabbing me and stuff. And it's just so juicy. However,
no, I just get goosebumps.
Let's actually talk into what this is. So your work is really awakening the muse within women.
Yeah.
And, obviously I know this sort of story, but for the listeners, I'd love to know, coming from such a strong background, how did you find yourself literally initiating the muse in women?
Totally. Yeah. Well, first of all, burning the hell out in my own life, right? Being on that trajectory of achievement, push, focus, creating the business, trying to which at the time, obviously I didn't know that's what I was doing, but trying to prove my worth, trying to prove my value, trying to become someone in the world, and really getting to this point in my life where I realized I was just ticking the box of my life, right? It was this moment of, writing my TED Talk, the TED Talk rehearsal, launching multiple programs, planning multiple international events, and just literally reaching the point of not being able to get out of bed. And it was writing in my journal and realizing once I get through all of these things, and I just landed on me that I was oh, so once I get through my life, then I'll land in my life, experience my life. And it was such a habituated pattern of just pushing through, going to the next thing, just constantly trying to seek my sense of landing and safety, which of course at the time I didn't realize that's what it was, but looking back, I see that. And just realizing I cannot, my body was girl, by the way, we're not going to keep doing this. And that really set me on this trajectory of really starting to bring so much more play and aliveness and feminine energy in my life. Cause I was also one of those ladies that was told you're so in your masculine and that story of
of course that's
right?
why I'm here.
Of course, exactly.
Yeah.
And really starting to reclaim okay, what would it look like for my life to have more feeling, more play, more joy, and just over the years, then kind of life really initiating me into it really got to that point of not having a choice and initiating me onto this path of reclamation and melting down my business and really starting to look at my life in a new way, and doing deep healing work, really finally getting back into my body, I had, you sort of know, but I mean, I was 30 plus years of disordered eating, over exercise, restriction, just such demonization of my body. So I was just totally disembodied. I was living everywhere from the head up, constant anxiety, constant, the next thing, when I lose 5 kilos, when I make this amount of money after this launch, there was constantly out there and just was not in my body at all. And so eventually over time, really doing a lot of that deep, beautiful work and really starting to prioritize that, waking up my own muse, really starting to look at what would life look like. And as you know, with my business partner, Alexi, who was my, our co-conspirator in this landscape, supporting each other through this transition from what we kind of go from the boss babe to the soft babe, right, into the muse. And then through really that personal reclamation, just realizing how every experience of our life was so different. Everything in our life shifted just from really shifting in here, and then just realizing we cannot not share this. And it has been it feels like work that is bigger than us. I mean, you were here, right, this weekend. Like,
I'm so grateful that you said yes to this.
right. And it's like so hard to explain, but it's like, it's not just
Yeah.
like there is something potent and magical that like comes when women are coming together in this way, that it's just been, we've just continued to experience how potent it is. And that's kind of where we are. And we keep following that muse and it keeps continuing to expand and deepen.
The thing that I love the most about, you know, especially being in the world of both of you, like having you both there of like, you know, this is my woman being held so fucking deeply.
Right.
But the thing that I love the most is like how much it's an invitation for collaboration because like, you know, you did do it alone. You were in business on your own and all of that. And I'd love to know because like, you know, I'm in this space now where I'm processing that and there's some ideas percolating and all this stuff happening around collaboration in my world.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit too share that here.
Sure, yeah.
But, you know, it's the one thing I'd love to know is like, when did that shift happen for you? Because you and Lex, you guys, and I've got her coming on the podcast next week.
Amazing.
So cool. It's probably going to be asking similar questions and from different angles, right? But it's like, when did you know that, okay, I have to stop doing this on my own? Like, when was that piece for you?
Well, actually, the irony with Alexi and I is that we were collaborators from the moment we met. So when I was running my business and Lex and people were coming down, I actually hosted them as speakers at so I used to run Conscious Boss business events in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And so I hosted them. So we started, her and I, like as collaborators, as like teammates in that way. And we've run multiple businesses. We've started a charity together. We filmed a documentary in prison together. Like we've always had like a very collaborative energy, her and I. So I think that for me, personally, well, with Lex and I, we've just kind of had a synergy in that way where I think like, you know, we spoke about in the weekend, like almost like divine assignment, like we've always kind of had, and we've sort of tracked along in our different journeys, but always sort of had a collaborative energy. But I think it is something that is just innately, can be innately challenging in the world in terms of just like competitiveness between women. And I think that that's something that we see and we hear a lot of, like when women come into our spaces of like, you know, I've never really felt safe around women, or I've never really felt like I could be myself around women. And there's a really big piece there. And I think a lot of this work is about women, you know, again, when we can bring that truth back into ourselves and again, become that our own muse, then it almost feels like a lot of that competition dies down because we're not trying to run the same race. It's like what my muse says is alignment is different to yours and different to yours. And when we're so dialed into that, then the competition piece feels like it melts away. Like the, you know, comparison melts away because we can finally honor like, oh, like, cause Lex and I, like, obviously we do like collaborate in such a deep and beautiful way. And I'm so different to her and we bring such different magic. And also like what my life is so different to hers and what she wants is different to what I want. And so again, I think it gives us permission to, when we step into that, to feel so much more safe and abundant in like that collaborative conversation, because it's like, we're not trying to grasp at the same thing. It's like really honoring like, oh wow, you bring something so different, I bring something so different, we're trying to create something so different. And if we're in that divine assignment, then it's always going to be abundant when we're in that truth. So that therefore obviously fosters such a better energy and being collaborative.
So good. You've just given me so many yeses to where my brain is right now. And I
Amazing.
Now, I just want to bring it back for the audience a little bit because we've played with the word muse because that's your work. And like for the woman listening and like a lot of my audience, a lot of my clients, we are the hustle go-getters and finding that feminine edge, finding that flow. What is the muse?
Yeah, totally. It's a great question. And it's something that I think, you know, that it can be defined differently by anyone in terms of Lex and I and the work that we do in the landscape of Awaken the Muse and Embody the Muse. It's really like that inner truth, that inner alignment. It's like, you know, the whole journey in our business of the muse came from a conversation between both of us of like, what would it look like to be the muse of your life, right? And we usually see the muse as like, you know, the external, like you're the muse for the artist or you're kind of this externalized piece. And it's like, well, what if you were your own muse of your life? So like, what creates inspiration? What like lights you up? What fills you with joy? Like, and really being in devotion to that and trusting that like that inspiration, that intuition, that inner alignment is like the guiding inspiration for your life. And then if we sort of take it out a little bit more in the macro, as Lex and I are kind of in the expansion of now, is like really from that macro sort of spiritual level too, like trusting that like those innate desires, those innate yearnings are also like communication from the divine. And then it's like, what if you were also like life's muse, you know, and it's like you're just living this inspiration from being dialed into your truth that is like communication with the divine. And it's just like the more we get into this work, the more it expands. But first and foremost, it's really like coming back home to yourself and like going like, what lights me up? Like what would give my life meaning? And because there's just so much conditioning of what a woman's supposed to be and how she's supposed to look and what makes her successful, right? Which is what creates a lot of us high performing women in the hustle and the grind, because we're like, oh, now we're the boss babe. So we've got to do this. We've got to be a boss mom. We've got to be a boss wife. We've got to do, you know, have 6 figures. Now it's 7 figures.
Pressure's here.
Yeah. It's just like, oh my gosh, you know? And it's like, okay, we're just taking that back of like, what is like a good life for me? What's a good woman for me? And really having the courage to like step forth into that path.
Yeah. And, you know, I was sitting there last night. We're in the process. Obviously, we're in Austin at the moment.
Yeah.
And when we go home, we're going to be settling into a new home. And I'm looking through all the houses and I was like, waiting for that yes and no. Like that really leaning in is like, what does my muse actually want? And the house that came up was so much bigger than I actually expected. And I was like, all right, we're applying for that one. But, you know, for so many of us, it's like, how do I actually listen to that piece, that aliveness? And I know every time I've listened to that, something great has come from it. And the one thing I want to talk about is because so many of us have that is because the thing I wanted to ask you is like, so many of us have that little like, you know, nudge, but we deny it and we deny it and we keep denying it. And then they end up in spaces with us like that. But it's like, how do you start to listen to it first for yourself? Like what was your like tangible piece?
Totally. I mean, the real initiatory moment that started me on this whole other track was that total burnout, right? When I could not get out of bed, when I was in the midst of all those things I had to do. That was a big moment where I realized, oh, okay. And then of course I tried to like, I had that sort of mode where I sort of flung quite into like, you know, we talked about this a bit in the weekend, like the pendulum swung like all the way to the other side.
I'm there.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't want to do anything. I just want to be in my feminine and flow, which I think is a normal, you know, auto correction of like being one way for so long. But that was really what like put me on the path. And really, you know, and we talk about this a bit in Muse, it's like life is always giving us those nudges. So yes, we feel them internally, but also life is giving them to us. Like the ways we used to go about our life that no longer work anymore. You know, like I realized I could no longer diet and restrict anymore because my body was rebounding and my body was being like, nah, girl, sorry. And it's like, all right, that old strategy no longer works. So it's like life was going, okay, so I'm like, hey, I'm going to have to do something different here. You know, we continuously end up in the same relationships, constantly having the same relationship, different face, or the same thing. If they would just change, then I could. Like there's all of these moments that kind of life presents us with that at some point we get to take responsibility for and go, okay, like, you know, it was me realizing also at 30, I don't know, like 35 is a few years ago, that I realized, hey, I've wanted a relationship for so long, but yet it's still not here. I wonder if there's something I'm doing, right? And it was like, again, these moments of responsibility where we have to be willing to look at like, how may I be the source for what I'm experiencing instead of constantly waiting for things to change. So there are these kind of main moments, like one for me was my body, one for me was the relationship, which actually started to cause me to really take these deeper looks at like, okay, so I'm like running this path, but I'm still not getting closer to what it is I'm saying I'm wanting. So maybe there's a deeper invitation here. And that's a big piece of what led me into this journey of like, you know, deep healing, deep connection to self, really unveiling a lot of the patterns that I had that kept me away from what it is that I wanted. And so, you know, really having the willingness to look around your life and starting to really tune in at like, like, why do I keep ending up in this situation? What, like, how come I'm still in this place? And really being willing to take the deeper look at, you know, what life might be inviting you into to start realizing. Because this is the big piece we see with so many women, especially like relationally, because it's such a big thing. But like really saying like, when the conditions of my life would just change, then I will. And that's a really great place to start. Ask yourself, where in your life are you saying, when this would just change, then I would? And that's a really beautiful clue to start seeing where life is inviting you into.
I had that this morning.
Yeah.
When I'm not so busy this week, I'll go to the gym.
Yeah, totally.
But totally little moments like that, right?
And there's seasons. So like, let's
Yeah.
be real. There's seasons like, I'm a mess. I still love taking care of my body, and I've been in Austin for a month and I've gone to the gym 3 times. And that's when I know I'm busy, because I'm like, and so, but it's a crazy season.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're perpetually being in a story of, once I get through this launch, once I once my body loses whatever, those are really great clues of like, oh, I'm placing the experience of my life outside of this, and there's a deeper invitation.
Yeah. I really want to like go a little bit deeper here as well, because one of the patterns I used to do myself, not so much because I'm in a relationship now, obviously.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah. Nice.
But,
good job, boy.
But what actually I used to do, and I know a lot of women do this, is like, you know, when you're first dating, the muse comes on. It's like that first couple of weeks, you're like, oh my God, I'm playing my desire, I'm feeling this. And then the minute there's any level of like, you know, okay, this is it, I would find for myself it died. Instantly.
You would find yourself a what?
It died. Like it was like, you know, I'm just getting, and it became like this thing where I didn't keep the aliveness, and that happened in my relationship.
Yeah.
Like, and it was like, I'd have moments in and out, and like even on the weekend, I was like, oh my God, a part of me came alive that I didn't realize I was missing since motherhood.
Yeah.
And I thought I was pretty good with it these days, but that was like a fuck moment. Like you seen the moment.
Yeah.
And like, I'd love for you to really like speak into your experience, because it's easy for us to turn it on when we're dating, or it's easier for us to turn it on when we should be that person.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're literally the living, breathing energy of this all the time, regardless of if there's a man, regardless of what you know the outcome to be.
Yep.
How do you maintain that for yourself?
Yeah. Well, firstly, obviously I have my moments. I mean, I love that I'm the living, breathing moment at all times. But I think the biggest get here is that we're not doing it for a result, right?
Yeah.
We're not turning it on so we attract the guy. We're not turning it on so our partner is happy. We're not turning it on when the camera's on, right? It's like the gift is the access point for ourself. It's like, that's such the big kind of get of Muse. It's like, we do this so that we can feel good in our bodies, like for ourselves. We do this so that we have intimacy with self. We do this for like the very result of the experience. And I think, again, that's just such a thing that we're not cultured into doing in society, because society doesn't, you know, clap you on the back for doing your deep emotional work, or for really being able to turn on your own radiance. Like, it's like, okay, cool. And what did that produce? Let me celebrate the production. Like, if that created something. Oh, you're in a relationship. Good job. It worked.
Yeah. In the manifestation game, it's like, let me hold this energy so I can have that.
Exactly.
And it's all this getting.
Yeah. And so again, what that creates is like, we're constantly still grasping. And then if it doesn't create the thing, because we're misguided on what we're even doing it for, like, all right, I'll do this if it creates the result. Like, I'll do this as long as, now the relationship here, I don't need to do it because he's here. It's like, it's not for the result. It's for the experience of your own aliveness. It's for the experience of your own like radiance. It's for the experience of realizing how damn good it feels to be in your own body and that energy. And lo and behold, does that create results? Yeah, it does, right? Because that's magnetic as hell. And we can tell, you can see a woman or any human, right, that's in their alignment, that's in their passion, that's in their, that's in, like we saw over the last 5 days, that's in their rawness, that's in their wildness, that's in all the places we don't let ourselves go. It's fucking magnetic. I don't know if we can swear on here.
Yeah, we can swear.
Okay,
go
great.
for it.
Australians and Kiwis, we're probably going to swear. But it's like, that's what it's for. And like, yes, it creates the results, but when we're in the contingency of, I'll do this, I'll practice if, I'll, you know, do my embodiment if, and then it's like, oh, it's not working. Then we stop. It's like, well, that's not the point of it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I see so many energetic leaks. I was literally having a conversation with a client and I shared with her, like, you know, she was going through some stuff with a new relationship. And I was like, you need to share what's really happening for you. Let the full emotion be seen. And she's like, I don't want to come off as manipulative. And I'm like, but you're not if it's truth.
Right. Totally.
Like, if you're actually just sharing like what you're feeling, there's no manipulation there. And that's where I feel like we've been misguided as women. It's like, oh, but I've got to curate my emotion. And it's like, it's not so much about curating. It's just about, how do I enter it cleanly.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we've really been like playing with over the weekend is like, how do I fully feel my emotion? So when I share from a place of embodiment.
Yep.
And
self-responsibility.
100%, because it's like, if we constantly just like spew here, we create those results.
Totally.
And I know for myself personally, we've talked about this a bit, but like where I was like, I've got to try and keep it clean from a surface level, I was taking responsibility from everyone else.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And so it's like I'm taking responsibility for my partner and making sure that I pay for everything. And, you know, he's like then going, oh, I don't have to really do much. Like he was, but he, you know, wasn't living into the full embodiment of what he could have. And literally shifting from something real small on the weekend, he's like, oh, I'm here.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
And I mean, we see that time and time again, especially relationally in the man-woman dynamic, because it's like when women finally allow themselves to open and soften into that, and not even necessarily soften, just give full permission, because it might be rage, it might be wildness, it could be all of those pieces, but also not going into that over-functioning and controlling, you know, the men feel that. And then they're like, and same with like, they start initiating sex, they start, you know, taking the trash out, they start doing all these things that women are yearning to do, that they feel like they have to over control to do. And it comes from that space. But again, when it comes, when the intention of the practice or the intention of it, like you said, then it can be manipulative. Then you're in the grasping for it versus the true, like, this is what is alive. And then seeing really the ripples that come from that. But you're not, again, it's not, there's no graspy energy on it, because it's really just for the expression for yourself.
100%. The amount of times I actually say to women, like we might have like a big like session or whatever where something really alive has come up and it's been out, and I'm like, have you ever let him see this?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, oh, no.
Not allowed to show that bit.
No.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I've learned, and you know, it's been a deepening practice over and over again, is like that bit is the bit that they want.
And was that not like the macro theme of the 5 days? It was like all of these pieces of like, and again, like for everyone listening, it's like, it all makes sense. Like the patterns make sense. Like how we try to stay safe in the world makes sense. How we show up makes sense, right? Because of all the conditioning, not just from society, but then we've got patterns from your childhood, all of these ways that are like wound in our body, like we're habituated into that. And so it makes sense. And that's why, you know, being in these rooms matters so much. That's why being in these safe spaces matters so much, because it's like to have the safe experience of choosing something different and realizing like we're safe in it. Because again, being, you know, a good woman these days, like to show your messy, wild parts, but even to show your vulnerable heart, like we're so afraid of that. Yet women are yearning for intimacy, but like, wait, I like, this is too needy or this is too much. And so it shuts down. And we saw obviously when we had the men in the weekend, like the range of wild women that got expressed for everything from sex, not actually having sex, just for the listeners, but like sexual energy to rage, to sorrow, to vulnerability, and like how ready and available and yearning these men were to experience that.
And that was the biggest takeaway for me. And I haven't shared this on the show yet, but my biggest takeaway was like how much I hadn't been held in my pain.
Yeah.
Like the strong woman was so fucking alive.
Right? Yeah.
And it was like to actually have him hold me while I'm crying, like the little girl inside is aching.
Yeah.
It healed like such a big part of me. So personally, thank you for that.
My gosh. So like, it's just, I mean, that it was just so, it's like so profound and beautiful to see it. And that's the thing. I mean, I'm sure everybody listening, right? Like the strong woman holding it all together, you know, getting it together. I'm the cool girl. Like that's been one of my big patterns to break, like the cool girl in relationships. Like, oh, that's fine. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's fine. I don't really need too much. And it's like, and again, when it's not in truth, then again, there's like this inherent disconnect because it's like, that doesn't feel like that's like the resonance is gone because there's not aliveness. We're like hiding and closing. Yeah. And so it's just such, but it's also just, it's so wild to just really, really realize how we are the source of it, right? Like to actually, and it's empowering because it means like you just said, you've just experienced different things from your partner just because of the shift that you made. So it's like, wow, when we, again, not doing it for the result, but knowing the result comes, if we just practice for ourselves, if we start to give ourselves permission for all of those pieces to come on, if we start to give ourselves permission to just even a little bit like, you know, expand a little when we kind of want to shut down. Like this is a little bit, right? Like that titration of like really starting to be able to allow more of that expression on, which is really the whole work of the Muse.
Yeah.
Then like that's like, then we have so much more access again, because it's intimacy with self. Like we're giving full permission of like, what's alive here? Like I can hold me, I can hold that. And again, that's what makes the full expression so much more safe again for the masculine, because it's coming from this place of like, it's not like even your pain, it's not I'm angry at you and like this is coming at you, but it's like see me in the sorrow, like see me in this.
Well, I had an experience yesterday, which I think you're going to love this one.
Okay, great.
But like I had to wake my partner up because it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before. And it was straight out of the retreat. I had a VIP day with my client. It was a business strategy session. So I was like, oh, I've got to go straight back into business mode, right? Anyway, so I've nudged him and I'm like, hey, babe, I need you to wake up. I just need to help tidy the house up quickly because she was coming to our house.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's woken up and he thought I woke him up in anger, like because I was a bit rushed.
Yeah.
I didn't, but he because he was half asleep, perceived it in the wrong way. And he's got up and he's rushing around and he's banging shit. And I was just like, I'm like, what is up your bum? And he's like, oh, yeah, we don't need it. The house is clean. What's going on? Like, and he was real like off. And I realized in that moment, like his energy was I was so tender, it was hurting my body. And like, it would have been so easy to default to anger. It would have been so easy to be like, well, fuck you. But I stopped in the moment and I just went like, I was like, I have to just stop. Your energy's actually feels like it's hurting my body right now. Like I said, and all I want is a cuddle.
Oh.
And he literally just came up, wrapped his arms around me and just was like, I'm sorry, babe.
Yeah.
And it was just that moment. And it was like, that could have been a huge argument.
100%.
It could have been something really, really big. But because I was so available for what my body was actually telling without manipulating, just like, this hurts.
Yeah.
Like he was just like, I'm really sorry.
Oh my God.
Like,
so beautiful.
And I was just like, oh, like, and softened into him straight away because he actually could feel that.
Totally.
And I just think it's like such a piece of the work that is just so missing. And I had a thought before, something I say in my business all the time is like, money's a byproduct.
Yeah.
Right. Because obviously I'm coaching women in business. I'm talking about that. It's like, and they're all like, oh, I want to hit this figure and I want to do this. And I'm like, yeah, but it's the byproduct of who you're being.
Yeah.
This is the same thing.
Oh, for sure.
Right. It's like when you tap into this stuff, the byproduct is more money, more sex, more love, more life, more everything.
More everything.
Yeah.
We literally say that like, when was it? I think it was the year before last, was maybe like a year and a half into Muse. And Lex and I were kind of reflecting as we were like moving into the new year. And I was like, wow, like there is nothing that I'm like, in the new year, like this is going to be different. And this, I was like, yes, and more please. Like it was like, yes to this and just more please. And it sort of really gets to that because you start to build such a reservoir of like, and we were talking about this before, just in terms of like just getting in our bodies quickly before here. The more you practice, the more you're in devotion to this, the more you're in connection to self, like the access point and how quickly you can get into that space is so fast because you're just so practiced there. So it's just like your capacity to just experience more. And I mean, again, it's such a big thing, especially for women in business, to really flesh apart that like after this launch, after this amount of money, like really starting to see. And again, we always underline, it's not about not wanting all of those things. Like Lex and I are building a beautiful big business. We love it. It's amazing. We're both ambitious. We both want great lives, like, all the things. But the context it comes from is entirely different, right? And it's like really being mindful of those, like, where is that just after this and just after that figure coming from, and totally understanding and knowing like as well, it's like, what is the experience of your life worth to you? And really checking in, like, are you in the experience of your life? Are you in the experience of your body? Are you experiencing the abundance you currently have? Because if that availability within your body and your life isn't there, it's not going to be there at 7 figures. It's not going to be there after the next launch. Like that's a practice we have to prioritize. And then of course, like you said, then everything is a byproduct of that.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that because back like before I was like really anchored as embodied business being my way of business. Yeah. I was like so many one-on-one clients, so much that I was just doing. I was so busy. And I was like, I was starting to miss, like, why did I actually get into this?
Yeah,
like I was
totally.
so, like the burnout, all that sort of stuff. And, one day I was sitting there and I'd had this moment where, and I feel like I go through this nearly every up level. My clients change, business shifts. And like I even said to you the other day, I feel like my business is changing again. Like there's something juicier coming through. And, there's this like opening that happens. But mine was when I was like, okay, no more busyness. Like I'm like, I get to bring everyone, because everyone was coming to me for the same thing.
Right.
I was like, they all want to feel embodied. They all want to like play with their woman and they want business, but it's more their woman. So I was like, how do I bring that in a way where it's actually honored? And so I went from working like 60 hours a week, sometimes 70, sometimes 80.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot, especially having a little one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved into working like only having to work like 6 to 8 hours a week.
Yeah.
Like that's how much I technically had to show up.
Yeah.
But what I noticed was like at first that felt so good. I was like, Muse is on here, living, breathing energy. But then I got caught up in the cycle of let's overwork again. And I defaulted straight back, even though I only had to, like I'd set up the support system for that many hours, but I was like, how much can we work? How much can we get it done? And I noticed the minute I went back into that, the money dipped. Like everything started drying out. Like Abane and I almost separated 12 months ago.
Yeah, wow.
You know, because of all of this and like the work that I've done over these last 12 months to get here. Like we got engaged 6 months ago. So that tells you how much that shifted.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not even 6 months ago, maybe 5 months ago. But that shows the space in which when you actually access that point, how much it can change.
Yeah.
And I'd love
and just quickly, because just before you ask that next question, that speaks to what you asked me earlier of like, how did you start to notice and like, how did you see you were kind of being invited onto that trajectory? It's right. Like that. It's like going like, whoa, all of a sudden I'm working more, but making less money. Weird. Again, because that's highlighting like a compulsion to fill the space with something that you think is like the better strategy or like what makes you a more valuable woman or whatever the story is, right? 100%. And it's like, oh, something to notice. That's not working anymore.
And you know what's funny as well? I put on so much weight in that period of time. I felt like I'd completely lost myself as a woman just because I was trying to fill holes. Yeah. And it's like I was talking the talk, but I wasn't living it. And it's like I literally, like for those of you who've avidly watched the Embodied Business Show, like I took a big pause from this for a while because I felt like I couldn't actually bring the flavor of what it was around. Yeah. And so I honored that. I was like, it's not beautiful. Right now. But yeah, seeing like the minute I chose it, it's like I've now since lost like 39 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, like
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that happened just before you came into it. I'm still on the journey. Like there's still more I want to create with my body, but like it's so much, there's so much richness when we actually choose, okay, what's here first? So I'm curious, like out of everything that you know since practicing this work and being with this, what's been your, I guess, juiciest takeaway personally for yourself?
Juiciest takeaway. I mean, I would say even just driving here just now, right? Like I was in the car and I was just like, like just like vibing out and feeling so good and like actually just being able to like feel, and I'm not going to use the word pleasure because I think that can be polarizing, but I can feel like places in my body that feel really good and like just like feeling really like just like in the vibe, and like I'm driving and I'm just like, oh, like that access and the ability to like be in my body. And again, as someone who had 30 plus years of like my body is my enemy and if you would just change my life would be better, being able to get to that place where I can walk into a room and just like own myself, the place where I can feel so like I can access my own aliveness and expression. Like I can be seen, I can be held because I have so much more intimacy with self and so much more access because of the practice. That's what's so amazing for me. Like I've been in rooms where even on the weekend, right, with Lex and I, we did those dances at the end and Lex and I did
so hot.
Right? I mean, it is.
Because it's so true though.
And it's just so much truth. And it's like we were saying, you know, just for those of you listening, like we just, you know, everyone had an opportunity to move and be seen, and Lex and I did a dance, and like we were saying, like 4 years ago, there's no way that we would like be in our bodies enough, have enough intimacy to hold that much intimacy with each other, like feel connected enough. And it's like these little litmus tests along the way that allow me to see like, whoa, like you're just becoming such a different woman and so much more fullness and so much more available online. And so it's like, you know, I know that's a really big answer to your question, but it's these moments. And I think as well for me relationally and like in dating, there was just such a big hook of like, how you are will impact how I am. So like, where are you at? And then let me be there, because I can't be more, because that would be vulnerable. And I'm not sure if you're there. So like, da, da, da. And now it's just like, hey, this is for me. So I'm here. And so it's just like so much more permission to be fully here, and just like such a deep level of like self-intimacy that just again allows so much more of me to be online in every area of my life, you know?
Yeah.
And then that's not to mention like building a business that I absolutely adore, living at the beach in Portugal in this house that I absolutely love, like, you know, so many beautiful things that have come from that. But it's that feeling and that expression and that experience that I get to have like every day, feeling like I'm so effing in alignment with myself, and I can bring that into pretty much any space I am.
Yeah. I feel like there's just been like this magical bubble that's happened right now.
Portal, baby.
Yeah, it like happens whenever it's here. Like, but yeah, the words of Preston really land here for me. I remember one day him saying the best ability is availability. And it's like, yeah, that's been like my mantra.
Like aliveness.
Aliveness. Yeah. And like what you're talking about there is like, you know, I shared on the weekend, I got distracted by a bird and tripped over and spilled my coffee. But it's like, how much can you feel moment to moment? Because even myself, I would have those moments where I'd be like so frantic and so panicked. And I remember I hadn't seen one of my girlfriends. We'd had a falling out, and it'd been like maybe 6 years. And, you know, I was in the wrong, definitely in that relationship, because I'd had this relationship with her where she was like an older sister, like almost mother archetype for me. And so she just wanted to do things for me in the most beautiful way. It was like there was never any like anything with it. However, what I had done was anchored myself into victim with her. Every time I needed something, who did I call? Every time like something bad was going on in my life, who did I call? Online, I'm like living this fucking amazing life, but she's getting this shitty side of me. And so I was like, boom, nah, I'm the victim around them. I can't be around them. And so I'd created this story that they weren't like I didn't know how to be my bigness around them. Anyway, years gone by, I realized what I did, and I made a huge apology to her, because she was like to me, I didn't know what I'd ever did. I'd only ever tried to love you. And I'm like, I know you actually did nothing wrong. Like she was just there for me. And it was never in a way where she was enabling the victim. It was just like, I knew that part was alive and created there. So when I actually like came back and we caught up after all of that had happened, she was like, you are so different. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, the only way I can put it into words is like, you were constantly coming down off like crack. And I'm like, what? She's like, have you ever seen like, you know, like the cocaine addicts where they're just like, fidgety
like you used
and
to
like,
be like that?
Like she's like, you were constantly, you could tell you weren't here. Like there was no presence. You were on high alert, like vigilant all the time. And I was like, wow, like I knew it was bad, but I didn't know how bad it was.
Yeah, that's
and
abrasive.
And she was just like, your body's, like you're actually present with me. And in my head, I just straight away went to like, oh, fuck, she put up with me all those years. Like
literally,
you know, because it's like now that I know what it is to feel in my body, it's like that feels like a completely separate life.
Totally. Oh my gosh, I know, like totally different people.
Yeah.
And you can feel that difference. I think that's the point too. Like you can feel that difference with people. Like, you know, when someone like is in their body and is comfortable with themselves and is at home there, and then the person that's like, I got to get this done. Like there's no presence, there's no magnetism, there's no aliveness. It's just like, and we're so trained in that because we're so busy and there's so much to do. Because we've got to make sure we're worthy and doing all the things so we're safe. Right? It's like such a hypervigilant bracing energy.
Yeah. And I feel like you resonate with that, like where you used to be as well. Like, you know, and I remember saying before I met Urbane and before I had Tiariki and whatever, and, you know, I'd always be like, I hate it when people who have kids tell me like, you know, how are you busy? Like you don't have anything going on, right? And I would always be like, I'm so busy. Like they don't know. Like, and I would be really like, you know, defensive. And it's like try and protect my chaos. Because that's what kept me safe.
For sure.
Yeah. And like now when you look at it, it's like I'm like to you, hey, how long are you here for? And you're like, oh, I'm here for 3 days. I'm like, got time for a podcast? Yeah, sure. Like just noticing the spaciousness that comes with like when we actually allow ourselves freedom, it's like we don't have to just grab onto everything, you know? Yeah.
Well, and it's really realizing that that's the piece. It's kind of like the inconvenient truth, but it is the truth that will set you free, is really realizing that we do keep ourselves in that space. Like, again, it's not your crazy schedule. It's not that they just won't pick up the trash. It's not those things. Like, of course, like let's create environments that work for us. And there is a nervous system strategy, right? There is a somatic embodied pattern that keeps you addicted to that way of being.
Yeah.
Because again, the reality is when there's space, when we stop and we unhook from those strategies, there's a whole world in here that we have not given any attention. And like, guess what? Sitting with yourself, sitting in that space, sitting with the of feeling like you have to do all those things, like all of that is like a whole world that needs love and care and attention and intimacy. And that's the gateway to everything that you're actually looking for and all the external pieces. But it's really, again, that piece of responsibility of like, again, like what story have you been telling yourself for so long? Like if you've always had a problem with money, if it's never been enough, if you've always felt disconnected from your, if you've always had all these things, the answer is like, there's something in here that's like, because again, sitting with ourselves, cultivating emotional intimacy, you know, cultivating relational skills first and foremost with ourselves, like that does take work. It does. There are moments where that's wildly uncomfortable. Like, God damn. Like,
it's
and you know,
painful when you're faced off
super
with that.
painful. And like, you know, something just to share some light at the end of the tunnel. Like, firstly, it's the initiation that's required to get to that aliveness, that radiance, that access point. But it also starts to get so much easier, and there starts to develop this like real sweetness that comes, and like self-esteem, like true, deep, anchored worthiness, like true, deep, unshakable self-esteem. Because you're like, I fucking go there. I'm with me. I'm with this. And like, that's how we cultivate that capacity to like be that woman, right? Whatever that woman is you're trying to be, like this is the gateway to it, because it's like, that's unshakable. That's not contingent on the launch, on the media, on all the things you think it means. It's friggin' unshakable, right? And like, that's again, the price we get to pay to, and you know, one of my teachers says like the price of openness is feeling. So if you want to be that radiant, alive woman, you also have to be willing to like go within and feel all of that stuff. And I shared, I think over the weekend, like I didn't feel the grief of my dad dying until 10 years after he died. Because I was so disconnected from my emotional world. And I was so like, obviously it's such a big level of grief, but I didn't have the capacity. And it's like, again, that's a piece of the noticing, like when is life initiating and inviting you into your essentially initiation, right? It was like 10 years later, it was like, oh, I can't not feel this. Like life was like, by the way, here you go. Like it's time, and really paying attention to that.
But I think though society has told us like, you know, there's a timeline. You shouldn't be grieving a year later. You know, if you're still feeling sad, go take some Xanax or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, actually, the reason why you need that is because you're not willing to feel.
100%.
Like, it's so true.
The reason why you have a shopping addiction, a social media addiction, a food addiction, and not even necessarily addiction. Because
I've had all of those.
Exactly. And that's like, addiction is like a too heavy of a word, like compulsion, like habit, things you can't break. Like, again, starting to notice like, oh, okay, I'm going out. And it's like really starting to notice that as clues, even if you just put a tiny bit of space in between the thing and like actually doing it and going like, ooh, like putting your hand on your body and just going like, what's here? Like what, like, wow, I'm noticing that there's like discomfort I'm trying to escape from, right? Even just starting to cultivate a little bit of that practice is so big.
I was sharing with a client the other day, like I've gone so deep into these tiny little nuances of where my addictions lie. I remember one time I had to give up, my give up to grow up in something that I was doing was I had to give up Kmart, which is you know, and so that for me felt huge because I'd go in, like I was starting to make more money. It was nothing for me to go into Kmart and spend $500. Now, how much shit can you buy from Kmart for $500? Like
a lot of shit.
2 trolleys of shit, like unnecessary crap that wasn't, you know, but it was filling a void. And so I had like and then it was like the food and the things, but the thing that was really nuanced for me that really stood out the loudest, right? And this had such a big opening in my relationship, in my life, in everything was back when I was a personal trainer and I would literally have like $20 in my bank account, like nothing. I'd still spend that $20 at a cafe. Getting a nice coffee and getting a nice thing. And I remember we were going through something. I can't remember what Abe and I were going through, but at the time money was tight and we were like, you know, and it was like, actually I do remember the exact time. We'd just moved into our house and our bank accounts got emptied because all of this stuff happened. And we were so broke. He had lost his job and I was the only financial provider at the time, but because everything had just been pulled out of our accounts because we were meant to get some grants and they didn't. So we ended up having to pay an extra $90,000 of everything that we had essentially sitting in the account, just had to go. And so it was a huge shock to both of our nervous systems.
Yeah. Scary.
Yeah. And I said to him that day, I'm like sitting there and I was like, I really need to go out for breakfast. And he's like, we can't go out for breakfast right now. We don't have money. Yeah. And I was like, no, there's a nudge inside of me. I need to go out for breakfast. And he was like, babe, he's like, we've literally got like $90 until the next bit comes in.
Right.
And we knew that would be used on breakfast.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, we need to go out for breakfast. And so we went to our tiny little cafe that we loved. And as we're sitting there, I literally sat at the table and I cried the whole breakfast. And he's just like hand on my leg, just holding me, just like, you know, and like not really holding, but he just knew like we were in it. Like, and it's like, I'm just going to put my hand here. And anyway, I just realized there was a moment where I had been held.
I just was thinking the same thing. Yeah, look at you.
Anyway, this guy came over and he put down $60 on the table. And he was like, I don't know what you're going through right now, but I can tell it's big and I just want you to know that God loves you.
Oh, wow.
And as soon as he said it, like I just cried. But I realized that like I went home and I journaled on that whole experience. I was like, why did I need to go there? Like, yes, there was a nudge, but as a young girl, what had actually happened was my dad was pretty much not available in my life. Yeah. And when I would see him, he would take us out to these lavish restaurants. And so my way of feeling love was to go have nice food.
Right.
And so I developed this food addiction, but in that moment I was met in it. And it also healed the food addiction. It was really crazy because I didn't need that. I need to go out after that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You know, I still enjoy it, but it wasn't like I have to because I was like met like in the emotion of what was happening. But that little moment opened so much for us. Like both of him and I cried at the table that day. And we walked away from it just being like, what the fuck just happened? But it was like, because I listened to the nudge, but I also was like, okay, let me look at what's underneath this, what was really here. I was able to like really look at how my needs and my desires were actually hand in hand. And because like there was a desire for faith and for trust in that moment.
Yeah.
And so it's like sometimes we don't look at what's actually here and the nuances, but it healed such a big part of the addiction cycle because I listened to the nudge over the let's just go anywhere and get food.
Right.
I went to the exact place I wanted to go and I just sat there knowing that it was out of our budget at the time.
Yeah.
You know?
That's such a big thing that we speak about in Muse too, is just like really starting to, and firstly, of course, like nuance. There's so much nuance in all of this. And there's so many places that this grasping and this contingency and this like, you know, when I get like linger, and especially in places that like society rewards, that actually like the more we do this work, we start to go, oh, whoa, it's hiding there. And whoa, it's hiding there, right?
Yeah.
But a big thing that we talk about as well is like really starting to attune to like, oh, that innate desire that you had, like trusting, like even though you couldn't see why in the moment, like, no, I know I have to go do this thing, how much it opened for you and how much that expanded, and like really starting to gain that's such a big part of becoming the woman who like trusts herself and is like in tune and in alignment, because it's like a lot of the times it won't make sense, and it doesn't have to make sense to anyone outside of you, because a lot of the time it won't, because it's your truth. It's your direct connection to the divine. It's your direct like, you know, alignment. And so it's also a part of this repatterning that as women, we can still create so much beauty and magic and like abundance and all the things we want, but in this way that doesn't feel like this old way where it had to be sacrifice and pushing and striving. It's like, holy hell. Like, I mean, pretty much the Muse kind of started from like I've been going to dance classes for like since I lived in LA, and that was such a big piece of me starting to get into my sensuality and sexuality. And then Lex and I started taking some classes here, and even that was such a big piece that started to fuel like our awakening, that then started to fuel this business. And it's like, oh wait, just from going to a dance class? And again, but it's, you don't do it because you're trying to get a result from it, but it's like, wait, I have this desire and like, I'm going to follow it. I don't know why, but it's like you're doing it for simply that, not trying to get a result. But it is this repatterning of really rebuilding this trust of like, whoa, I can like build a life and a business like from a place of like, this actually feels good while I'm doing it. What? It's such a different concept. Like, does you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I love that the dance class, like the nudge for you to do more dance is what opened everything up. Like, like, and I think it's something that I really feel into, because I remember like even a couple years back, I was watching someone like do like a burlesque type of thing. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, what the fuck she need to do that for? Like,
Right.
like you don't need to do that. Like I can be sexy and da da da.
Yeah.
But even like on the weekend, having these experiences where it didn't need to be sexual, but my body naturally went there.
Yeah.
Like my body wanted to express that way. And without it being taboo, without it being made wrong, without it being like anything that you, no, don't do that. It was such a liberating moment for me. Like I literally picked that energy up and took it home to my partner. And he was like, whatever happened in that room,
right?
Like you can keep doing it. Like,
I know. We have a joke that we need like our happy husbands club, because like we have definitely created a lot of happy husbands, happy partners.
Yeah.
It's like after their wives come home and their girlfriends come home. Yeah.
Like
Again,
even
not that it's for that, but they're happy.
But it's like, it's not, but none of it was about him.
Exactly.
And
That's
in
the
my
point.
head, when I was watching these women, I was like, do they just film the videos so men can watch them? Like,
interesting to notice that story though, right?
yeah. And then it was about maybe 18 months ago, one of my girlfriends actually teaches that style of dance, and she is the bomb. Like she's she's
so sexy,
beautiful, and she teaches like real sensual movement as well, and she's really well known for it. And she's coming to Australia, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go to one of her classes. Like, anyway, I walked in there and instantly I was like, out of my depth. Like this is way too much, like body overwhelm, overload. And I literally just sat back, but I just watched them because I was like, just the watching of them was like mesmerizing.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, oh, to see a woman so expressed. Like it's just like, and it's not even like a turn on where you're like, oh my God, I'm about to have an orgasm. It's like a,
it's like awe.
Yeah. And like, you know, like I really felt that like on the weekend of like, not just watching everyone, but within myself, it's like, oh, here she is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so many of us are missing that.
I mean, most of us, right? And again, because we're not, it speaks to the bigger conversation of feeling like, oh, that's something I'll get to once I, you know, achieve everything I want to achieve, or I'm valuable for all these other reasons, because it's not seen as a priority. Like our aliveness, our expression, our sensuality, our sexuality, all those things, it feels like something that lives over there when, you know, we have time for it. And it's like, that's such a big piece of the shift around of going, actually that piece is the gateway to like all the things you're yearning for and wanting, because it's such a, and again, it doesn't mean it's the sensuality or the sexuality, but it's the invitation by life to like, what are you yearning for? Like what is inspiring you? Is it inspiring you to go take a dance class? Maybe it's a painting class. Maybe it's a pottery class. Maybe it's an intimacy class. Maybe it's like whatever this thing is that feels like it doesn't make sense. And it's just like, I don't have time for that. Like starting to really notice that, because it's like, that is the pathway to the life and the woman you want to be. But it's just like really retraining and reconditioning ourselves to place value back on that again. And that's such a big thing for the boss babe woman, right? Because we're just, you know, I know for me, I didn't feel like the feminine had any value. And then that played in so big with like dating, because I was like, oh, my value, like I remember I used to go on dates back in my conscious boss days where like I used to think talking about how much money I made, like made me really like valuable and important, like on a date. And now I'm like, oh Lord. Like,
like I want to be provided for.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like I'm like, total opposite. And also just realizing again, like these misplaced places that we put our value, because really reclaiming that the feminine, and again, first and foremost for ourselves, but definitely as well, like in relationship, like that softness, that openness, that intimacy with self, that connection, that radiance, like all of that, like that is so valuable in and of itself. That is the life force that like the world wants from us. But we have to be in this, it's a retraining to really start to see and claim that first for ourselves of like, oh, wow, this is like, again, like I talked about that deeply steeped, unshakable sense of self-worth and value. It comes from that. And again, integration, because I want to be really clear, this work of the Muse in this conversation, it's not just about screw the masculine, screw the achievement. Like we're not about that. You know,
no,
we talk about, integrated and embodied wholeness, because we need the masculine. We need that containment. It's like the jump off point for our feminine. So it's both. It's just that if you're listening to this podcast and if you're one of the women like us, you're just a little more trained generally these days, women, in the masculine, in the, and even then, a lot of it's hypervigilance, a lot of it's survival energy.
Yeah.
You know, it's not actually true divine masculine containment. It's like hypervigilance embracing. So
100%.
also really repatterning that relationship
It's
we have
protection.
with that. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I shared this on the weekend as well. Like something I used to always say was like, I don't want you. I don't need you. I want you.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, actually, I do need you. There's a part of me that like needs and desires to feel really soft and safe and those sort of things. And it's like, it's so conditioned in us to not do that, especially when, you know, if we're single or, you know, I know for me.
You can't be needy. That's not what a sexy woman is. You can't be needy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like we become this big, bold person when we're single and then we shut down
Independent
in relationships.
woman.
Yeah. But I remember like when I was single, I was like so flirty, so like all the things, but it wasn't, the come from wasn't that clean.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I was like, I could walk up to anyone and like turn it on and and people would just be like, oh my God, like who is this woman? She's so flirtatious. I remember I had a guy once say to me, I've never had someone with such intense energy come at me and I can't handle it.
Wow.
And I was like,
honest.
and I was like, oh, okay. Like, and this was in an NLP training, right?
Wow.
Mind you.
Yeah.
So he was like, I feel like you just want to fuck me every time you look at me.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh shit. Like, and that was a real big moment for me to be like, where is my leaky energy? Like, I think I'm flirting, but it's actually really leaky.
Yeah.
And
can you look back and see what was the context for you with that?
That was
behavior?
neediness for me, but trying to be the strong woman.
Yeah.
It was like, I wanted him to see my softness.
Okay. Yeah.
But what was coming off was like, I'm going to put all of my like, you know, and I'd started studying like feminine, masculine polarity, all that sort of stuff back then. And I was like, oh, he needs to feel me dripping wet with desire. Yeah. So it came from the wrong space. Yeah. It came from the like, let me manipulate him to think that I'm like into him. Whereas like when I remember this one night, I was like, I'd broken up with my partner at the time, like my ex, and I was in that stage where I'd finally felt free. Like, you know how you like have to go through a couple months of detachment and then you're like, oh, finally available. And I went out this one night and I was just not interested in a man whatsoever. I just wanted to have fun. Like I just was like just jumping around. It was not sexy. It was just like I dressed nice, but I was just having so much fun. I had 3 people ask me out on a date that night.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and normally I would not, like I'd get people who wanted to have sex, but they wouldn't ask me out on a date. And I literally said to one of the guys, I was like, what made you ask me out on a date? And he's like, to be honest, out of everyone that was in that club, you felt the freest.
Yeah. And like really letting that land for all the women out there that think we have to be so effing perfect. And like that, and especially like who we think we need to be for men. And again, underlining like we're not doing any of this for them. And for a lot of us women, like being attractive to men is important. Like finding a great relationship is important. So like we get to speak to it, but it's like the fact that it's again, that macro trend from the weekend of like the thing you think you don't want to show is the thing that people are yearning for. And like 100%. That happened to me when I, like I said, I live in Portugal and like my body stuff has been like one of my biggest like entrances to my initiation to really like own my radiance without it being so contingent on what my body looks like. And like my body was like bigger than I wanted it to be and probably at the biggest it'd been for a long time. And I was like envisioning like I went to this beach party and I intended like to go in, like, I'm going to go in like, and I'm just going to be so radiant. I'm going to be so in my body. I'm going to be the woman that like feels already like what I want to be and what I want to look like. And, you know, and it was the craziest thing. Like I've actually never had an experience like it, but I mean, I had like maybe like 12 dudes. It was so crazy. And I share this because like, that's just not usually like my experience, especially not before. Cause I've had a story of like, I'm not attractive to men and I don't get chosen and like just my closure story. Yeah. And it was just again, I felt like it was such a nod from life of like, girl, it ain't about that, you know? And it was just like, you know, guys saying like, you're radiant and like, you're a goddess and like these things that like just don't say and like stopping me when I'm walking. And I was like, whoa, like, wow, it's really not about the things you thought it was. And I think those moments are so powerful. I mean, I haven't had a night like that since, you know, that was just, it was such a thing that it was like crazy, but it was like life. It just felt like life was like, girl, are you clear yet? Like, did it land yet? Like, it's not about the places you're putting all of this emphasis. And it was so healing. And it's just like really, those moments are so powerful to really let them land of like, the more you can start cracking that shield of like, it's this thing that is the, you know, the gateway to the experience I want or to like who I need to be. They're so powerful when you let them land.
Well, especially I think now in like society, like this is one thing I love so much about both you and Lex is like there's natural
Right.
around who you are. Like there's not the big fake everything.
Right.
And, you know, and it's not to, you know, dismiss
Choose
any
your
woman
adventure, yeah.
like that has done that. But, you know, I've been so like in my body around, like, I don't ever want to have to get Botox and those sorts of things. And I can notice a difference from when I'm feeling crunchy and dry as a woman to when I actually feel alive. It doesn't look like I need it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's crazy. Like, and I remember I had one of my very first mentors, she was in her 50s at the time. And like at the time I was a personal trainer, and every time I'd see her, I was just like, what is it about this woman? She's just so like yummy is the word that I would use. And it was because she was so in devotion to like what kept her alive.
Yeah.
And still to this day, she's one of those women where I'm just like, every time I'm around her, it's just like so much grace and so much just like juice, like that just is like, and you know, she's like crone energy that's just like available. And I'm like, it's that. It's like, you know, and we see it so many times. It's like, you're like, I don't know what it is about that person.
Totally. Yeah.
But it's like attraction actually isn't about the physical.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it's like when you're someone who has that so deeply rooted in like your bones, like to start to really allow that to shift is like, again, it's so liberating. And that's like such a big piece of this book. It's like you really are like getting liberated from all of these like closures and things you thought had to be a certain way, and like really like, oh, like you see this, it's like you literally start to see life in such a different way. And again, it's like when you can start to like really revalue all the places we haven't placed value on and like shift it into something that actually is sustainable and actually is really what creates the experience of life that you want versus again, all these external things. And once you get a taste of it, you can't go back.
You can't. And like the thing that's like really playing in my mind right now, I'm hearing it so loudly, is like, this is what it is to be a safe woman. Because it's like, I'm so safe in myself that I can hold you too.
Totally.
Yeah. And like, and I said to Lex, like, you know, this was like maybe 12 months ago. I said to her, I was like, you have been such a healing piece for me because of the safety that she holds within herself.
Yeah.
And like seeing that expressed now through the container that we're all in together and how that's opened right up. It's like, a safe woman isn't someone who constantly panders and is like, are you okay? Are you okay? Like, yeah, I got you. I got you. Like, yeah, I've got you.
Yeah.
And whatever you need, I'm here. But I'm also trusting that you got you too.
Totally. That.
Yeah. If you were to describe a safe woman, what would you say she is?
I mean, I would say, it's kind of like what you said. I think it's first and foremost understanding that your safety is your responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Because I think like we're so conditioned, especially as women, to place our safety outside of ourselves. And I think first and foremost, even defining like, what are we talking about when we say safety? Because I think it's like, to me, safety is like that experience of knowing like I have got me no matter what happens, no matter what life throws at me. And that doesn't mean I'm independent and I don't need anyone. But like first and foremost, the first place I go is here. Like that my contingency of how I get to show up is here. And like that my safety, I rely on that here. And like from that place, I bring that place to the world. But it's really that like to have internal safety is to know like that we can regulate, know that we can ground, know that we can connect in our body, know that we can hold space for ourselves, know that we can like also feel safe to express and be radiant and open our heart. Like we have that internal intimacy that we know, oh yeah, it's safe for all of me to come out because at the end of the day, I'm with me, I've got me, no matter what happens, like I'm good. And then we can also still ask for what I want because we feel safe to be seen. We feel safe to ask for support. We feel safe to receive that intimacy. But first and foremost, like is that unshakable knowing and self-responsibility of like, it comes from here.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's so important because like I know for a lot of my life, it was women were not safe.
Yeah. A lot of women have that.
Yeah. And like I had an experience when I was like, would have been 16 or 17. And I was living at a home and my friend at the time who I had lived with her previously, her and her family, because I moved out at 15 and then I'd got my own place. But my car had, I can't remember what was wrong with it, but it had something go wrong. Her boyfriend was a mechanic, so he fixed the car. And so there was this rumor that went around that I was slept with him so he would fix the car.
Right.
And it ruined like all my friends turned against me. Everyone was like, and I was like, I didn't know at the time, like that was why they weren't talking to me. And I was just like, why is everyone against me? And they're like, well, why don't you go, I'm not going to say his name, but why don't you go and ask such and such? And I was like, what? Like, and then I found out what had happened and I confronted her in the moment. And I was like 16, 17, working at KFC when I said this.
Yeah.
I literally looked at her and I said, I no longer trust you because if you think that I would do that to you, that means you would do it to me.
Right.
And in that moment, like I didn't realize the wisdom that I held.
Yeah.
Like, because I was just like, I would never do that.
Right.
And to have that thought that I would do that, like, and it ruined our friendship for years and years and years. And like, it was like maybe 10 years later, we sort of reconnected and she was like, you know what, like when you said that to me, it didn't feel like I didn't know how to receive it. But now older as a woman, I really get that. And I was like, I didn't even know what I was saying at that time.
Right.
However, my soul knew, like the depth of that knew because I was such a, like I had me at such a young age, but it's also like I knew for some reason, like what people see in you is also what they see in themselves.
Right.
So how can we create safety for another when we can't even hold it for ourselves?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And it's like, I mean, it's the most rewarding gift to give yourself and then of course everyone else in your life because again, like you said, if someone's like, it's actually noticing, we talk about this a lot with like the appeasing strategy or people pleasing and how, you know, apt that is with so many women, right? Or and actually how women do that because they think that's what people want of them, but actually how unsafe that experience is. Because if you don't feel like someone has boundaries, if you don't feel like someone has their own back, it's actually like, then you feel like you have to kind of overfunction. Like, are you good? Like, will you actually tell me no if that's not good? Like, I don't really trust that you have yourself. And now I'm having to do overtime to be around you.
Yeah.
You don't have yourself. Like being around people that have their safety, that are clean, that are self-responsible, take like ownership of themselves, their energy. Like they're so good to be around because it's like,
you don't need a social battery for those people.
Yeah. Cause it's like, all right, you got it, you know? And like, and then how deep you can go, how much you can create with those people is so different because it's like, there's so much more capacity there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true too. Like even the other week I was like, I just need to take a minute to go and sit in the massage chair when we're at the thing. And everyone's like, are you all right? And I'm like, yeah, I just need a minute for myself. And like just being so certain in that, like years ago, I wouldn't have done that. I would have been like, oh, I've got to make sure I mingle with everyone and I got to hold this. But it's like when you really have yourself and you're like, okay, what do I need to do to show up? Yeah. It's a completely different game. Yeah. Such a different game.
And it's such a big thing for women, right? It's like Lexi and I were just talking about that literally this morning about, because we were also filming a little bit of a podcast while we have that beautiful stage there.
Yeah.
And just talking about, again, when we think about what is a good woman and how does she act, it's like being in devotion to her needs is not really one that's high on the list, right? Because a good woman is selfless. She takes care of everyone. She takes care of the home. Like those things are like what society tells you a good woman is, that someone who like really takes care of themselves is kind of like, that's selfish or whatever. There's these conditionings that keep us from like stepping into this self-honoring because it's like, oh, is it all right for me to like take care of myself? And it's like really, again, rewiring, like, how are you going to take care of anyone if you're not taking care of yourself? Right. And again, like how much more trustable that is if you know someone's going to take care of themselves.
Yeah. I actually had an experience like this would be a good like 18 months ago or not, but I'd have this thing where I was really learning, like once I express an emotion, I have to be able to hold that and just stand in like, okay, I can share the emotion. I can share what I need. Then let him have his experience. Yeah. Anyway, what I caught like this one time, I'm like watching myself. We'd had this huge argument and then we'd had the like the reconnection point afterwards where we were like, okay, this is actually what I need. But then I noticed myself for like the next 2 days in a peace. And so here I am going, oh yeah, my strategy is just fight, freeze, right? Like freeze, fight, whatever. And then I was like, oh, hold on a second. Like when I caught myself, I'm in the kitchen packing away the dishwasher being like, is there anything you need? Like, and I literally called myself and I said to him, I was like, holy shit. He's like, what? And I'm like, I've been in a peas since we had that argument. And he's like, yeah, it's fucking annoying. And I was just like, right. I was like, because I hadn't seen it in myself. I was like, I can say what I need. I've got what I want. Not realizing all around it, I would make sure that everyone's okay just so I could say what I needed. Yeah. And like, it's once again, the strong woman, like how do you mask it? How do you put it into spaces? Like it was like like a mind-blowing
Right.
moment for me.
So good. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Once you see them, and then also how amazing to have that reflected back of like, yeah, it's annoying. Like, can you not do that? It's like, oh, right. Doesn't
Yeah.
even, what you don't even like it either. And I'm doing it because I think you'll want it to make me more safe.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's actually not even something that you want.
100%. Like, I think it's so interesting because like, especially when you're in relationship, and I'm sure you'd see this so much when you're dating, like the way attachment styles come up and different things like that. Like I am, when I'm in it, I'm anxious attachment hard. I'm like, what do you need? Like, you know, it's all there. And he's like avoidant, like, no, get away from me.
Yeah.
Like, and so really having to work the muscle of like, I'm so secure in myself. Like it's been like, it still comes up and it's still such a journey of being like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Like let him have his process.
Yeah.
Let him be with it. I'm so good.
Yeah.
And like, I still have moments where it's like, oh, and then I'm like, okay, like catch it.
Yeah.
And the more you catch it, the more there's availability for it.
Totally. And I think I really want to underline that of like, oh, it still happens. It's like, and it will forevermore. And like, even just in that, because again, like we underlined, I think a lot this weekend, it's like, we can try to, especially as high achieving, like, oh, we're going to come in and going to fix it. I'm going to fix my anxious attachment. I'm going to fix this strategy. I'm going to stop doing these things. And it's like, first and foremost, that is not how our patterns change. Because it's like,
you can't shame something into changing.
And it's like, you know, and again, this work is so deep and so profound and so beautiful. But like, even just that energy, you know, one of my teachers also says like, every moment of self-awareness is a celebration. So it's like, oh, look at me catching that thing. Cool. Like, what do I need in this moment? I'm doing that thing, but like also understanding like the journey of like creating deeper capacity for self, you know, deeper healing of, you know, these inner children wounds and our wiring and our pattern and the places that we close, like really knowing like this journey is a forever journey. Like, cause again, there's always more depth. There's always more layers. There's always more aliveness. Like, I know from me, like, I mean, I'm a junkie. So like, hey, it's just is what it is. Like, I love it because there's just always so much more.
Yeah.
But also, and yes, like you definitely shift them, but it's like not coming at things from that place of like, I'm going to fix this thing and this is going to go. Cause like there is no place to get to where we're healed and complete and finished. It's just like more room, more range, more expansion, but in having that skill set to see it and to catch it. And then to also be able to go like, oh, this is like, you know, I say the activation is the invitation. So instead of like, I need you to do this thing so I feel safe, it's like, oh, this activation. Oh, baby, like, wow, I'm really noticing you're feeling a lot of anxiety. And like, especially the deeper you do this work and the more you understand why, you just have so much more capacity to know like the only thing that's needed right there is it's like, it's you yearning for you, right? And no amount of, that's why, you know, again, we're talking like this hungry ghost, right? It's like when we don't do this work, it's like this hungry ghost. There's no amount of money. There's no amount of praise. There's no amount of anything that ever is going to be enough because it's not the thing that actually you're yearning for.
Yep.
It's like you're yearning for this communion with self, this deep healing with self. Like your little one is desperate for you to come home and have her, right? And so until we do that, there will never be enough of the things and it will not be sustainable because it's you yearning for you in those moments.
It's so ironic that you say that because like this was like a month ago. I had a moment of that.
Yeah.
I need you to do this. And, you know, I was sitting there and Bane's like to me, he's like, you know, because I was saying to him, I want you to earn more money and start to meet me financially. And he's like, you know, he goes, this pattern comes up so much for you. He goes, you did it when we had nothing in the bank account. You did it when we had 10 grand. You did it when we had 30 grand. Now we've got literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank account.
Yeah.
You're still doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, no matter what I earn, this is going to be the same thing.
Yep.
And I'm like,
oh shit.
oh, I'm like, it just feels like, and the more that I see it, it's like, I can't unsee it.
Yep.
And like after the weekend, I was like, oh, it was actually never the money.
Yeah.
Like the money, like I'm so good financially.
Right, totally.
It was all the other pieces that I was like, I just want to know I got me.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute I was like, oh, fuck, I can be like messy, wild, whatever without like, cause I would say I was like probably like an 8 out of 10 there.
Yeah.
But there was pieces that were still lingering.
Yeah.
And I will always be on the journey. I'll probably always be the 8 out of 10.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was like,
because 10 moves.
But it was like the landing in like, fuck.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just, unless you allow yourself to feel what that is, the goalpost will get bigger and bigger and bigger.
And that's the most powerful and exciting thing to get because it's like, oh, well that I can work with. Like now I'm actually working with what is the real situation. Again, me spending 35 years trying to change my body just to get like, it wasn't until like 2 years ago, my brother said like, have you ever thought about the fact that it's not your body, but that you're just an anxious person and it went onto the body? And I was like, I had never fucking thought about that. And I was like, I couldn't unsee it. And then it was like,
Yeah.
oh shit, all this time, like that energy, right? That wiring in the nervous system, which is why we do so much, like, which is why we do all the embodiment nervous system work. Because until you friggin' deal with that pattern, it's going to constantly try to find a place to go. And so it's really figuring out like, okay, and we talk about this in Muse, like your key hooks, right? Your hooks for your safety strategies. Mine was like my body, and also money is a big one for me. And I think for a lot of women in business, right?
Women, yeah.
Again, because there is a reality that there is an amount of safety that it generates, but it's like, how much is your sense of self contingent on it? And I can see this, like I shared over the weekend, where it's like, again, seeing that when you can see it so blatantly, like, oh, I've got all this money in the bank account, but I still have this feeling, to finally be able to soberly look and go, oh, so it's not that, because like I had the same feeling at that amount. I had the same feeling, same with me. I had the same feeling when I was skinnier, and the same, because it's like, it's never enough. The hungry ghost, because it's not the thing. It's like, oh shit, like I'm making that the thing, but like really there's something here that like I get to really like hold and be with.
Yeah, and one thing I find is the spiritual community is so quick to take it out of the body.
Right.
Right? And it's like, well, actually, what's here?
Yeah.
Like,
a lot of people are like, I'm in the ethers. It's like, yeah, you need to get in your motherfucking body.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. But it's something that I always like talk about in my work is like, you know, when it comes to things like where it's like outside of itself, external validation, it's usually going to all hold the same relationship. And the three that I sort of point it to is money, men, and God.
Yeah.
Right? They all have the same sort of, if we want to look at energetic qualities of external, it's kind of the same thing. Like knowing that all of our relationship with them is also our relationship in self. Like,
I mean, our relationship with anything is our relationship with self.
yeah, so true. And it's like when we start to really play in the spiritual depths of what it is to play in your muse, like that is living desire-led, essentially. And that can feel fucking scary.
Yeah, I mean, let's not get it twisted. This can be really scary. Like this is like, it can be scary. It can be wildly uncomfortable, right? But it's like, you know, and there's moments where it's like, hey, maybe this was better before I realized that. I mean, not me anymore. Like I could never go back, but there's definitely some moments.
I had that moment. Definitely.
Yeah, right. Where you're like, it was better before I knew all of this or felt all of this, right? But it wasn't, because I was, you know, running the race, burning out, not feeling met.
It was better to avoid. It was easier to avoid.
Right. You think it is, right? But it's actually not. But yeah, it does. I mean, you know, I said a lot of times over this weekend, like it's warriors work, right? To go in, to really build this capacity. Like there is a price for your initiation. Like you have to be willing to go in and really do that. And that's why I think a lot of people don't, because it's not just like, oh, cool, you know, go to a dance class and you're good. It's like there's moments where I'm practicing, where I'm feeling, where I'm grieving, where I'm friggin' like being willing to be with like what is here, instead of, you know, go on a dating app or go and eat food, whatever. It's like, and it's like, holy shit, that does not feel good. Right. But like that process does start to get sweeter and more enjoyable and more and easier. The more tools you have, the more practice you have, the more willing you are. And again, like the more payoff you start to see it have, you're like, oh yeah, like there is no, and that doesn't mean that there's certain moments, like sometimes there's moments where I get to sit in front of Netflix and just turn the brain off and whatever.
Yeah, 100%.
But again, it's just like noticing when it's that compulsion and as being willing to like, go in first.
And it's interesting too, because most people think embodiment and this kind of work is just dance.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Like it might be a gateway to feeling something.
Yeah.
And like it might be a way of expressing it. But I have met and been mentored by a lot of people who I like when I was early in my embodiment journey, I was like, they're an embodiment coach, I got to work with them. They're an embodiment coach, I got to work with them. And I remember
it's a buzzword.
Yeah. Like, and I really I almost denied myself calling myself an embodiment coach for a really long time because everyone was calling it. And I was like, actually, I'm doing a different thing here. So I'm going to hold it. But I remember this one particular coach I worked with, like I feel even edgy talking about this online, but because she had no safety within herself and I was playing a bigger game than her and I didn't realize at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And she was like, like I could feel her jealousy coming online. And because I was so available to work on myself, I was like, where is this in me?
Yeah, totally.
Like, this is mine. Like, what is this here? And so it was like how do you distinguish that? Because for me, it was so loud that, and because I didn't want to take the arrows, I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So the appeaser was there trying to nurture her through it. And this is something I see in the embody like space. And when women come into this kind of space is like their power starts to come on in such a big way where they're like, but make sure I don't outshine anyone else. How did, like, because I know that you guys have both you and Lex have talked about that part of your journey.
Yeah.
How did you like allow yourself to really land in that, in like a way where it's like, I know my shine is never going to take yours out, because like that's one thing I really feel. It's like, and especially with you guys, it's like the more you guys shine, like it feels like it just pours everyone else.
Yeah.
Like, you know, pours into everyone else. But
totally.
What did it take for you to get to that?
Yeah. Well, and just that point too of like, you'd see that this weekend of like how liberating and expansive each woman coming fully online was, and also how different it looked, right?
Yeah,
it's like, whoa, aliveness, like literally I always call it like, you know, the showcase of aliveness at the end of the weekend, where it's just like every woman in their aliveness and how friggin' different it is and how beautiful it is. And I think that's such a big piece of like really knowing, again, like you're running your own race, and that you're, especially these days, like showing that liberation, being in your, and again, when you're in like your own embodiment, I think something I catch within myself and the nuance of it is like, is this, because again, you can take the same action and it be coming from two totally different places. Like,
100%.
you know, disembodied and embodied action can look the same, but feel entirely different, right?
Yeah, this is why a lot of people say all the right shit and never have a successful business. Like,
right.
All of those things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I'll catch sometimes like just little nuances of like, oh, am I sharing this because I want someone to see it? Or am I sharing this because I think I look hot? Or am I sharing this or whatever? Or am I like, I'm just sharing this because this feels so alive. And there's still those moments of like, again, even with all the stuff that we do is like titrating more of ourselves to come online. Like it's like, you know, you don't just jump from boom to boom, right? It's like over time. And again, like being seen in your radiance, being seen in your aliveness, being seen in your shine is something that like over time, the more you do, and again, took that action, didn't die, feel safe, more space, took the action, you know, and then over time it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you become, again, just so much more anchored in the safety of that, the safety of you allowing yourself to come on, the safety of being seen and more, because that was even a big thing for me that I realized with, like with my relationship with men and my relationship even with like allowing, again, the contingency of I have to look a certain way to feel sexy or to be sexy, and realizing that actually I had like I didn't like energy on me, right? It was like, that doesn't feel like, there was something about that. And so like having to slowly also rewire that of like, it's safe to be seen, safe to like shine in your radiance. It's safe to be sexy. It's safe to be all of these things. Like I had to build that capacity to be able to like, again, bring more of that online. So I would just say it's like a piece of that titration process of like, let a little bit more of you shine and see how that feels. And then that feels safer in your body. Like it's a process, right?
Yeah. It's like even like you can like compare it to in the bedroom, right? Like I know when I was like at my biggest, I did not want the lights on.
Right.
I was like, And then one day I had this moment where I was like, I need him to fully see me.
Yeah.
Like not in a sexual way. And so I stood at the end of the bed, butt fucking naked.
Yeah.
And I just shared everything. Like I had my hands open. I wanted to keep closing, and I opened myself up and I literally pointed out to him all the bits of my body I hated.
Oh yeah.
Like I sat there crying as I was doing it, but I knew that I was hiding myself and I was shaming myself. That was a really big part of me actually starting the process to lose weight.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't hiding behind it.
Yeah. And it was like, it's safe to be seen. Oh, okay. Maybe we don't need to like be here anymore.
We had the best sex after that.
I bet you did. Liberation, baby.
Yeah, but it was one of those moments where it was like, the more I hide it, the more I disconnect myself.
Yeah.
You know?
And I was literally saying that to Lex, I think, I don't know, sometime over the vortex of however the last few weeks has been, was having that conversation about, maybe it was actually with my client, about, in certain workshops and certain places where it's like, you have to be naked, or certain places where it's like, I would just remember like my whole body would be like, there's no way. Cause like that was so threatening to my system. Cause like so much of my safety and sense of being was on there, and I was so disconnected. It was like, there's no way I could be seen naked. Like I'm not, like it was so jarring. And then now realizing like I've been in a workshop like that too, where I literally like stood in front of a room of like 15 people to be in like ritual for like really accepting my body, and like got naked in front of the whole room and had them like, and they're like point out, and it's like, oh, this bit, and they're all looking at it. And it's like, but again, that's such a powerful, again, that's why again, this is great up until a point, but ain't nothing going to keep really sustainably actually shifting just from conceptually knowing like, oh yeah, I know I don't really like my body, or I should just love my body. Let me just, tell myself I love my body. You have to put yourself in the dojo of the place to really show yourself and get it in your body. Like, oh, yeah, people saw my body, didn't die. Whoa, he saw my body, pointed it all out, had great sex. Like these are the moments like that actually signal to yourself and to whatever it is your story is, that it's like, oh, that's not really true anymore.
But it's so funny because you can still hide in those moments.
Yeah.
So I did a workshop like that where I stood in front of, I think it was like 100 people in the room.
You can embodied versus disembodied action, right?
And so I did it, and I got up there and I was like, I have no shame. I was a personal trainer at the time. I had a fucking six pack. I was rocking it. Like, there's no shame on my body. And then the people who were running the workshop, they were like, ask yourself if you were really honest there. And instantly I felt my entire body collapse. Because I was like, I've actually got so much shame that I hide behind the body.
Yeah.
It's not so much the body. It's like my body's great, but it's great because I fucking hate myself.
Totally.
Like, and that was like such a liberating moment because like I had to like get really honest. Like, I hate that this side of my body has cellulite. So I work so hard to make sure that one pocket of cellulite never comes back.
Right.
Like all these tiny little pieces.
Right, but they're huge because it's like the amount of bandwidth that takes, the amount of focus and like hypervigilance of like, this thing matters so much. Let me make sure it's under control so like I'm safe. And it's like fucking exhausting,
Exhausting.
And then you never get to the place where you finally actually are like, oh yeah, sweet, I'm good.
Yeah, and now I'm like, shirt off, let me go dance. Like,
right, yeah. And like same with me, like the place I am now, like there is no version of me that like 5 years ago would not have worked out for how long have I been in Austin? Like nearly a month.
Yeah.
No version of me. Okay, what have I got? I've had done 3 days. And I'm like, that's why I'm like, that is such a testament to how busy we are. Cause I now like absolutely love working out. I always have, but like it used to just come from such a psychotic place.
Yeah.
It was like I was
have
to. It was like in like, there's no way you miss a workout. And to the point of just driving my body into the ground. And so it's like to get to a place where it's like, there's such a deep level of like trust that like, oh, so like my body, I trust my body to send me the hunger cues that like it is regulates its own self. Like it doesn't actually, I don't actually need to be like every day controlling the body. Like that's what I literally thought. If I don't work out, my body's going to change and I'm like screwed, It's like, oh no, my body is like so wise and it does its own thing. And like the exercise is a beautiful and amazing thing to take care of it, but it actually isn't the thing. And so it's like, even just those little moments of realizing like, oh wow. And how much more space that makes like, oh wow, I don't have to now in this crazy psychotic schedule also make sure I work out because, it's like actually the best thing for me is having a sleep in and getting our work done and like trusting that my body's got it. It's just like so much more space opens up.
It's funny you say that. One of my biggest breakthroughs I ever had, because I used to compete in figure comps,
wow.
right?
Yeah,
so you can imagine
intense.
like the control.
Oh my gosh, the micromanagement.
I was shredded. Super, super ripped. And like I remember one day being like, oh, the reason why I do all of that is it's because it's the one area of my life I can control. Everywhere else was chaotic. Yeah. Like I remember I had my car repoed. Like I fucking had to move back in with my parents. Like my life was falling apart. I lost my job. All of this shit happened. Like
but I could track my macros.
But I could track my macros. Right?
Totally.
And like once I actually had to look at that, like I was so repulsed by the gym. There was like when I stopped PTing, I actually had a whole like year where I couldn't walk into a gym. Yeah. Because I was so like, I didn't want to ever be that person again, but I actually delayed my healing by not being with it, So it's like, it's crazy how much it can have power over us, the ways in which we do things.
Yeah. Well, and it's that piece too of just like the two actions can look the same, and be totally different. So it's like, again, getting into the nuance of like, for some person to not go to the gym is the most healing thing for them. For somebody else, it's getting in the gym because they're using their body and they're doing it. But it's like, again, like, what is that true choice for yourself and where is it coming from? You know, like I didn't step foot in. I remember it was like 2 years, I think, that the only thing I did was walk when I like really allowed my body to like
lead the way.
Yeah. And it's such a big thing for women. And it's obviously come out for both of us on this podcast. So I'm sure there's going to be women listening. It's just such a big thing, that body image piece and the controlling of the body. Because again, and we live in a society that values that in such a huge way. But it's such a, you know, I don't really, and this, you know, I'm sure there's nuance to it, but I know that, you know, when we're externally like tracking macros and asking an app what we should put in our body, like it just, and like how much we should move, it's just such a disembodied place. Like really starting to like intuitive eating and intuitive movement is like such a healing gift I've given my body, because it's like, oh, what does my body need? Like if we don't have that communication and we're again saying, oh, this app says I should eat, I've only got 300 calories left for the day, but I'm really hungry. It's like, oh, hello body cue, you don't matter. Not going to listen to you. And then we think that we can somehow be an embodied woman. It's like, oh,
100%. Even just how I like lost the weight recently.
Yeah.
I went into this program and it was great for a moment in time because it gave me the connection back into my body.
Yeah.
But I'd lost like literally 18 kilos, I think it was, within 8 weeks.
Whoa.
Right?
Whoa.
A lot.
That's aggressive.
Okay. It was very aggressive. It was very restrictive.
Oh, okay.
Very watch everything. It was a HCG diet.
Okay.
So it worked for what it needed to initially. But what I noticed was the minute I was off it, I was like weighing myself daily still.
Yeah.
I was beating myself up internally because of my mind and like what I was doing. I was like, I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And I went straight back into who I was when I competed.
Yeah.
And I knew that that was going to be a shadow that might come up. I said that to the mentor that I had at the time, but I felt it so loud where I was like, I actually like, I know I've still got room to go where I'm still working with it and I can't do it that way.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it's a dishonor of myself because of that. And so now it's like, how do we bridge the gap in a way that feels so nourishing where if I want to have a fucking donut, I can have a fucking donut.
Yeah.
Like, you know, not that it's something I would go for normally. I'm not really a sweets person.
Sure.
However, it's that, like I like a little bit of chocolate, but not a great deal. But it's that having the, I guess you could say the sovereignty over your body to know what's good.
And the trust, right? Like it's like assuming that our body isn't the wisest, most intelligent, like the things we don't know about life and science and our body. And then we're just like, oh, we know. And it's like, do you? Like even now, like my body's, you know, lost a little bit of weight over these last few months, like without any change to my food, without any change to my exercise. Again, just because it did its, you know, process where I just was like, all right, you know, I surrender. Like I want to be the person that has chocolate in their house and doesn't feel like they're going to eat it all. I want to be a person who can like stay at my friend's house, like, you know, like some Peace house. There's a house is basically a grocery store. And like that used to give me so much anxiety because I was like, I will literally like feel such a compulsion because there's chocolate over there and there's this because I was in such a deprivation around it that because I had to control it because like if I did that, then my body would change and then I wasn't safe. It was just so much hypervigilance. Whereas now, like I have chocolate everywhere, I've got food everywhere, I've got all these things that I wouldn't have been able to trust myself around at some point that I've rewired and allowed. And then like my body did her thing and I'm just like, this is what it's going to be because I don't want to feel restricted. I don't want to feel hypervigilant. I don't want that experience. And now it's that whole compulsion is down. And then it's like, oh, look at that. Also and I had to get to the place where I felt like my radiance, like even coming back to that story, I had to have these experiences for me to realize again, how much emphasis I was placing on my body being a certain way and going, oh no. So I have, you know, dated in that body. I've received compliments about, I've had so much wiring of like, oh, it's not this. It's not the body, girl. Like, but that had to happen for me to unhook from that. And again, just trusting the fucking wisdom of like the assignments life is giving you to finally come back home. And then it's like, oh, so I got to that place. And then it's like, and now my body is doing whatever she's doing. Like, and it's not from the place of hypervigilance and control and shaming. And so it's like, I actually get to be like, trusting and in my body and just like allowing it to be. And that's just it just feels like the most liberating experience for me, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, I always used to say it's not about the weight.
Never.
Never. And even like on the weekend, like I think it was the first day I got home and Ben's like, did they feed you? I'm like, yeah, why? And he's like, your face looks skinnier.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah, I was probably just storing something in it. Like, you know, it's like so much happens to our body that we hold on to.
Totally.
And we contort it and do all the things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So crazy.
It's so wise, especially for women. So much of our wisdom is living there. And it's like when we have that, you know, discombobulated relationship with it, it just traps a lot of that wisdom because we don't have availability for it.
100%. Yeah, it's wild. So I'm mindful of time. We've been talking
we could
for
talk
a while.
about this for 5,000 years.
Oh,
It's
literally. We spent 5 days and we're
I
still
know,
here.
I know, it's so good.
And I feel like this is like the depth of where we went is like, oh.
I know.
Anyway.
It was something else, yeah.
It was something else. So one question I love to ask everyone on here is, if this were the last time that my audience were ever to hear you speak, what would be the thing that you would want to leave them with?
I would want them to know, I'd want them to know that the experience of life that they are yearning for is available, and that it is the journey of them taking responsibility and cultivating intimacy with themselves and being willing to walk through whatever that fire is, like whatever that yearning is of their heart, to follow that and trust and know that that is going to liberate them and create the experience of their life that they're desiring, that it starts with them. That's the journey. And it's so fucking worth it.
So worth it. Like even like moving to Texas, like all of that was fucking so scary.
Yeah. And that it's not likely to make sense to anyone else but you. But
everyone
like
like,
trusting
why
that voice. Yeah.
There's a big reason. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's so many good things and so many good people here. Yeah. I've just come to terms with the fact that I'm like, okay, maybe I live between both places. Because I'm just not a Texas girly, but the people here are so good.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. Okay. I've loved this conversation.
Same.
So good. So good. So for the people who need to find you, be in the world of the Muse.
Yeah.
How do they get a hold of you?
Totally. So we actually have there's a couple of really beautiful free resources for anyone that's hitting in this and going like, okay, where am I at? We have a free quiz actually. It's just awakenthemuse.com/quiz. Yeah. And that actually lets you know like where you are in your feminine awakening, where some of the work might be. And it's really comprehensive. Like we put a lot of energy into that.
We'll put the links in the show notes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can basically find all of our stuff on Instagram. It's just at Muse Revealed. And then I'm just I am Emily Gallagher, but at Muse Revealed, we'll link you to all of our Muse landscape.
So good. So good. Find it. Do it. This is literally the work I'm doing. It's amazing.
I can't believe we have 9 more months together. Like we only have just started.
I'm so excited.
So good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. It's so good. Embodied.